Welcome to the program. You're listening to Business in Vancouver on Roundhouse Radio 98.3. We're the daily business program from the Business in Vancouver newspaper and BIV.com. And I'm Kirk LaPointe.
I'm Haley Wooden. Bidwell is a Vancouver-based startup that provides a platform for tenants to search and secure rentals through a blind bid system. And it also allows landlords to vet, select, and collect deposits from tenants. And now landlords won't even have to show their properties thanks to a new feature through Bidwell. Joining us in studio is Jordan Lewis. He is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Bidwell. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, it's not like you don't have to show the property at all. It's just the landlord doesn't have to show the property.
Exactly. And the industry is like that. What we're basically doing with on-demand leasing, it's a separate product, is we've spent the last year basically beta testing. We've done maybe 2,000 showings. We've maybe executed just over 200 leases. And in that time, we figured out leasing's expensive. So agency fees are really high.
Yeah.
When you start looking in a city like Vancouver, you might show a unit once or twice. It's high demand, low vacancy. The hourly rate some of these agencies make can exceed $2,000 an hour when you actually look at time spent on that project. So when you start looking at other professions and who makes that type of money, it's hard to find people that make that type of money. Talking neurosurgeons, maybe professional athletes, Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah, and not to disparage property managers and things, but and agents, but you know, they're probably not in the same ballpark as the neurosurgeon. Yeah.
Exactly, right. So we're kind of releasing this product to kind of look at how the system works and really kind of help decentralize. So with Bidwell, our attempts are to decentralize, give more power to tenants, give more power to landlords, and allow them to negotiate on rates instead of the industry itself. So with this product, our agents can actually show the unit. Landlords can pay hourly for those showings and actually leverage the platform to do the hardest part, which is showing, and then just worry about screening. So looking at who the tenant is and deciding whether or not they want to rent to them and at what rate, and kind of decentralize the power that exists that way. And we've had a lot of success with doing it. We've called up a lot of our clients and told them, hey, we want to do more for less. And some people thought we were crazy. But we believe in the system. It makes a lot of sense to do it this way. It's just in that time where people need to be paying for what they're doing.
So if they're not professionals who charge $2,000 an hour, who are your agents?
We work with agents as well, licensed real estate agents, and we also work with community experts. So community experts may live in the building, they might live in the area, it might be a PhD student, it might be a stay-at-home mom, people that really understand the neighborhood, and who's best but those people that live and work in the area to convey the value of that property. And so we leverage both. It really depends.
How would you describe the environment out there right now?
There's a lot of demand. The industry is going through a bit of a transition. People are really starting to become aware of how much money people are making. And when you look to other markets, so like the UK, New York, they deal with these similar type of issues, except tenants actually pay leasing fees there. It's not the landlord that typically pays those fees. So in the UK, I think right now they're going through a bit of a transition where they're looking to ban tenant leasing fees. And their fear is that those fees are going to boomerang back to the consumer. So like in any other business, if costs in the supply chain go up, who pays for that?
Yeah, you're not going to eliminate that industry per se. It's just going to shift its costs somewhere else.
Exactly. Yeah. So we kind of live in that environment where landlords already pay those fees. So by lowering the cost of leasing, we're creating greater room for them to negotiate. And actually, funny enough, we had a client yesterday. First thing he says to us is, I don't care as much about rate. I want a high quality tenant.
Yeah. And
that's not the biggest thing. And he said, I've worked with agents in the past, and agencies' goals don't always align with landlords. So landlords want the best tenant possible at the best rate possible.
When you say that there's room for negotiation, what is that margin of difference then? Is it 5%, 10% in some cases?
It really depends. It depends on the unit. So when we first came out, we were expressing that there is negotiation, more so on the rental side than there is the sale side.
Sure.
Because you care about who lives in your home. So we've seen units go well below that. We've seen it go 10, 15% under market value that the landlord was asking. It really depends on the unit, right? Not every unit has a view of the city. Not every unit faces the water. Some might be on a lower floor, might face the alley. There's lots of room for negotiation depending on the tenant, depending on the time of year. There's a lot of flexibility, and we've seen it time and time again.
Well, in a city like Vancouver, we're facing historically low vacancy rates. Do you think this dynamic's going to change if and when we see that vacancy rates start to rise a little bit?
So yeah, we've had listings in other cities, right? You look at Alberta and they're dealing with like high vacancy, and there's a lot of room for negotiation there as well because they want to rent their units. One cool thing with the lower fees we're presenting with on-demand leasing is in Vancouver, we're starting to see owners give incentives to attract tenants. You don't typically see that in a low vacancy market like Vancouver. So things like cable and internet for the year, maybe 1 month's free rent, maybe a gym membership. We have partnerships with a bunch of companies, and landlords can actually use those incentives to negotiate with tenants. So by creating less cost to actually leasing a property, there's a lot more room to negotiate. And we found that. And that's what we've learned over the past year. And we're bringing that product to the market.
Our guest is Jordan Lewis. He's the CEO, the co-founder of Biddwell. And you've had enough experience now with the company to help us understand a little bit of the learning that you've got in the market. And I'm sure you would have heard at first that the initial apprehension about a service like this was that Biddwell was really going to mean like bid up and up and up and up and up, and that landlords would be able to gouge. But what's the experience been, Jordan, around what's settled in? Like, what are you able to tell us about that?
Yeah, so there is room to negotiate. When we first came out, people were very apprehensive about the service. We take a conscious, approach to how we're doing it. We're very disruptive in how we try to impact affordability. We feel that negotiation is the best way to come to fair market value. When you actually ask a landlord what they're willing to accept, and when you ask a tenant what they're willing to pay, and they can agree on that, there's a lot of room for negotiation. We've seen it. A lot of listings we have go under ask, they go over. It really depends. So you can see that there's a lot of room to negotiate. And it's just the way things tend to be going because there's a lot of decentralization happening in the industry and you're putting more power into tenants and landlords' hands. So it's worked great and we've seen it be very effective.
What's your feedback being from landlords? Because of course, in a market like ours, you can get an obscenely great on their part rate, but you might not get the best tenant. So this allows them to maybe favor the latter and find someone who might stick around for longer or who might really treat the place well.
Yeah, so one thing we've learned, and we thought this from the onset, is that landlords really care about tenant quality, right? Yeah. They want a high quality tenant in their unit that won't damage it. We've always preached that's a lot like a job application. And we found that that's the case. I would say the number one decision leading a landlord to select a tenant is that tenant's ability to pay rent. Are they going to take care of the property? The price point, honestly, is secondary. Right? Yeah. That's the secondary factor. It's always the quality of the tenant that we've seen.
But beyond even that stability, are landlords now looking at the reputations that people have in the community as tenants? Do they want not just a reference check, but almost like a life skills check on whether you're going to take care of their place and water their plants and clean up the mold or whatever it is you're going to do?
Yeah, well, landlords definitely want someone that's going to respect their property. That's definitely the key. We have seen, so we run an intelligent tenant screening process where they will go into more than just their credit. We always preach internally that credit isn't the end all be all to a tenant, right? The last thing they're not going to pay is their rent, right? Whether or not they forgot to pay their Rogers bill 6 months ago. Not really the deciding factor. So our screening goes beyond credit checks. And they will go into some of the screening options is going into social media, looking at who that person is, like who their identity is, who they actually are. So that it has extended into that realm of who they are in society as a person, how they would interact in that neighborhood is definitely taken into consideration.
Is there an opportunity, or maybe it's starting to take shape? Obviously, tenants can have a profile on your site. They have their resumes, so to speak. Will it get to the point where landlords and tenants could be rated based on how good of a landlord he or she was, how great quality of a tenant this person was?
Yeah, so our rating system is a little bit different in that we allow people to earn badges. We don't do the starred rating system. We don't want people like a tenant to get a really bad rating. That's not our goal. So we allow them to earn badges. and they're able to kind of speak to that relevance through their profile. So they have the badge, they don't have the badge. And that's kind of the system we're working on.
Keeps it more positive.
Keeps it more positive, right? Everybody's been on, review boards and they can kind of get a little crazy. So we kind of try to keep it under control that way.
Yeah. What's the prospect for the market here, Jordan? I mean, I've heard some people say that because there is so much construction going on, obviously properties that have been bought by investors with the purpose to rent eventually. And when you take a look at what the city is trying to do with Airbnb and even the empty homes situation, might we expect a bit of a lessening of the fever that's out there right now with the rental stock, or is it just no matter what we build, we're just going to have demand for it, do you think?
Vancouver has a lot of demand, and I've grown up in Vancouver my entire life, and I've always thought, demand's going to slow down, and it never has. It just keeps going.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest factors we've seen is the availability of housing, right? There's not a lot of rental purpose-built properties that exist in the city, and that's kind of what leads to the increase in demand, right? Supply and demand. Mm-hmm. That was one of the things we kind of had to jump in front of when we first came out, is that these issues impacting rate are related to supply and demand. People aren't just going to pay any price. They need housing. They'll look for it. But the city's doing a lot of creative things, right? They have the DCL program where they basically try to cap rates, and they give developers incentives to build rental stock.
They waive them in some cases.
They waive their taxes and stuff to help build up that community. So there are things they're doing to try to create more stock, and that's really what will lead to a lessening of that environment and kind of lower the demand, is once there is a lot of rental stock out there. But that's the biggest factor. The availability of affordable homes is the biggest issue impacting.
It's a big issue. We started out by asking, do you still need someone to show your property? And you know what? With virtual reality, you can actually tour places to buy if you want to. Is that ever something that Biddwell might, flirt with, to see whether landlords can, through VR or through an application, have people just view their home and they don't need someone in between?
Yeah, so we do have that ability on the site. You can go on the site and do a virtual reality tour of the space. But in the rental space, especially long-term, which is what we focus on, not Airbnb. Airbnb is a platform where people can view the property and not physically see it. But when it's a long-term rental, people want to feel the space. Yeah. They want to go into it.
Technology is only going to take you so far.
So far, exactly. So you still need someone to open the door to that property. Yeah. And it's funny, that's kind of our awakening moment. We've been running this lease up for about a year now, 200 leases executed. And we started to see how much time was actually spent on these projects and how many hours were spent by an agent to do one close. The fees just don't make any sense. And that is a large portion of why fees in the city in terms of rental rates can go up, because that cost is put back on the tenant. So we want to just be able to have people that live and work in the community, whether they're a realtor or somebody who's just a working student, be able to open the door and show the unit, speak to the neighborhood's quality, and from that point, their job's done.
So how do people sign up to be one of your trusted exhibitors?
Yeah, so an agent on the platform. So basically, they can apply through the platform, ondemandleasing.com. They can jump on there and send in their application. We vet all of our agents, so they carry full liability insurance. We actually screen them more than the real estate board screens their own agents, just so that they have full liability. So we know who they are when they go into the unit. And then from that point on, they're just opening doors and showing units and getting paid for it. Not the rates in the $2,000 an hour range, but something that's more digestible.
Fits into that trend of the gig economy. You might have a job and this might be something you do on evenings or weekends.
Exactly. So it's the shared economy approach.
Or if you work from home. Exactly. I can see where you're working from home would be very attractive to do that.
Exactly. There's a lot of people that could benefit from working within that system because it's a part-time type of employment. And it's easy. If you live in the building, what perfect job opportunity then to show a unit in the building. And those people know that building well. They live there. They work in the neighborhood. So it's a great option. It's worked tremendously well for us. We've been leveraging this system for a while now, once we figured out that the fee structures don't make a lot of sense. And in some cases, you'll actually see owners being less willing to negotiate on rate because of the fees they're paying. So we wanted to eliminate that issue altogether, because we want Bidwell and on-demand leasing to be the fairest marketplace online. That's what we go for. We really believe that negotiation between tenant and landlord is the fairest way to determine a rental rate, other than someone's best guess. Everybody does a best guess approach. This is what I think I can get. They don't ever consult with people who are actually driving market to come up with those prices.
Fair point. Jordan, great to have you back on the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Jordan Lewis. He is the Chief Executive Officer and the co-founder of Bidwell. That's it for our show today. Thanks for listening to Business in Vancouver on Roundhouse Radio 98.3. I'm Haley Wooden.
And I'm Kirk LaPointe. Thanks a lot for listening. We'll see you next time.